Okay, hi everyone. I'm back with another scene here. Again, trying to see how good I can make Godot look, just using assets I make myself and not using any add-ons. And this scene again is made in Godot 3.3. I'll try and go over some of the stuff I do in the scene and talk a little bit about my process and what went right and what went wrong. To start out with, we can talk a little bit about my inspiration for this, and I think I've been very much looking at some of the Demon Souls remake and like these kind of dark fantasy interiors with lots of nice rocks and details and torchlight. So that was definitely part of the inspiration. Another inspiration which I've been interested in working on for a long time is trying to do modular level design. There's a really good talk, GDC talk from the people behind Fallout, about where they show stuff from Skyrim and they show stuff from Fallout about their process. I don't end up doing anything fancy or well thought out in this one, but it was an inspiration at least. So I tried to be a bit more thoughtful this time around. So I tried to, gather some inspiration, some references. I tried to make a mood board, which I just made in Krita. I should probably have used PureRef or something like that instead. But so these are just references from like rocks, or like rock walls and like old architecture that I liked and I thought fit in. I really like this wall, which I definitely end up taking a lot of inspiration from. And this is sort of more like the color I was looking for. You can see this is even from Demon Souls. And like just this, teal, orange, blue, yellow contrast was what I really wanted. So after this, I did a couple of different mock-ups. I was thinking about doing like a burial chamber, but in the end, I ended up making more just a cellar, and I unfortunately basically destroyed this scene along the way. But you can see what it looked like in the beginning when I just did this very simple mock-up, just with simple blender shapes and just trying to put the lights where I imagined they would be. And I like the look of this, so I just sort of went forward with it, which I think was a little bit of a mistake. I think at that point I should have stuck with it a bit and tried to adjust the light and gotten a look that I liked. So let's jump back here. But yeah, typical me. I instead of like actually figuring out the look, I just jumped straight into the work. What I started out figuring out was how was I gonna do all this brickwork, So we have pillars and we have these arches and we have the walls and some of the brickwork that surrounds the windows and stuff. So how are we gonna do all these different pieces? And of course, this could just have been a tiling texture, but I really wanted that like a tessellated look, so you can really see there are actually the mesh is actually complicated. And since we don't have tessellation in Godot, I had to get a mesh with some details in instead. So yeah, what I ended up doing, this is for example the pillar scene. I sculpted 2 bricks and then I basically just copy pasted them and rotated them, and I placed them in the shape of a pillar. And this was actually pretty easy, it just took a few minutes to do, after you sculpted the 2 bricks, which wasn't that complicated either. And then once you have this, you can make a simple version of the mesh, and then you can bake the details onto that, and I'm using the text tools add-on for that. So what you can see here is if we go over to a material view, the normal map is actually applied here, so you can see that even though we only have, well, we still have a lot of vertices to be honest, but we obviously have way fewer than if you look at here, where it's basically just black, but we get most of the details from the normal map, and we of course bake a bunch of other maps as well. So we can have a look here at how we then go about texturing this. So if we, okay, so this is the texture for the pillar, and this of course looks a bit strange because it's just put on a box. So if we select the model here, so this is how it looks. So what you can see we do here is we over from Blender I render out a normal map. I render out an ID map, so each brick gets a unique color. I render out a curvature map, so everything that's sticking out gets white, and everything that's on the inside there gets darkened, and an ambient occlusion map. Then I ended up making this setup, which I reuse for all my different models that need brickwork, and I just adjusted a little bit. So this is pretty complicated, not too bad, but like there's stuff where we add additional details to the normal map to make it look more like brick, and we add some cracks, and we give some color variants and some roughness variants to each of the bricks. And then the model ends up looking like this, and that is basically how we did all the different bricks for all the different work here. So that is pretty good. And then for all the different props here, so we have stuff like like this barrel, for example, and we have like the torches and the door and stuff. It was a similar workflow, but a bit more sort of specific to what we were doing. So if we open up the barrel, for example, this is the low detail model for that, and we have a higher detail model, which is mostly just really fine bevels and more rounded shapes. And again, just bake normal maps and all this for the barrel. And then when you take it over into Material Maker, if we can find it, where is my barrel? Okay. And this will probably look funny because we'll end up showing it on the wrong model. It'll look very, very strange here. So if we select the barrel here, we end up with something looking like this. So this is a real mess because I didn't end up cleaning this up. But it's basically just a lot of we have an ID map where I assigned different materials to the stuff I knew I wanted to do different things to, so I could have the wood applied in a certain way on parts of it, and have certain parts be metallic, and I ended up positioning some stuff in world space by rendering out a position map as well, so I could put some splatter down here, some dirt on it and stuff. Using the mask from the metal bands to also make the wood darker and dirtier in the middle and stuff like this. So it's all just procedural. There's nothing painted on here. Material Maker is still a bit early and rough on the painting side, but it's actually really good for doing this kind of procedural work, especially for props. So that's more or less how I ended up doing all of these props. And this one I have it assigned here, so you can see it actually looks really nice when you get it back into Blender with all the textures. Okay, let's jump back to the scene here. Okay. Oh. Okay, and then so I made a lot of different props. One prop that was a little bit different was actually all this woodwork, I just ended up making like a couple of different shapes of wood. I sculpted them, and then I could like make different props out of them. So like I have a, I have a beam, and I have a plank, and I have a shorter plank and stuff, and then I can just sort of make different shapes out of them. But so I did a little bit of sculpting for that one, but after that I also took it into Material Maker and did some more stuff to it. But yeah, other than that, then we have some different effects in the scene. Oh, see if I can actually control the camera here. So one of them is obviously the torch here. So if we go in and have a look at that. So this was sort of my first time really playing around with particles in Godot. So I had no idea how to do that. So I found a video on how to do some basic fire. I'll link it below. And I tried to just mostly follow that, but I wanted to do my own texture sheet for it. So if we look here, we have a texture sheet here, and I made this so we can just quickly have a look here. If we say so this is basically just a little fire fluid simulation that I rendered out, and then I used a free tool I found called Free Texture Packer to pack all the individual images into a texture sheet, and yeah, and that's basically just it's just a bunch of copies of that that gets used here. It's even the same that gets used for the sparks, just tiny ones of them. So it's just two different particle systems with yeah, just adjusting it until it looked pretty decent, and then this was the result, which I think is pretty good. It could definitely be better, but it works pretty well for this kind of scene. And the other big particle system we have in here, which you can see it whenever we are close to a light, is that we have these little dust motes. Let's see if I can actually select them here. So they're here. So there's like 80,000 motes, I think, all in all, because there's 40,000 in these, and there's two smaller particle systems as well. So, but they're really simple. They're just like particles that spawn everywhere and move in random directions and then fade away after a bit, and they're just lit and have what is it called, translucency set or something, so they can be backlit a little bit, transmission I mean. So even when the light is coming from the back, they still get lit up a little bit. And then the last effect here is probably these fancy light beams you've been looking at here, and they are basically just made with billboards. So they are one-dimensional or like one single-axis billboards. So like the axis is here, right, and then the billboard will only rotate around that. So if we select the material for those here, you can see we can make them look very silly here. But yeah, it's basically just a pretty simple vertex shader that ensures that the object only rotates around a single axis, and yeah, so you can do billboard shaders built into Godot, but they're doing it with the matrices, and I think it only works on the world y-axis, so you have to do a little other workaround. But this is, yeah, this is a great little shader because you can use it for but yeah, you can see it sort of falls apart if you get into them, right, because then you can see that they're rotating. But you can use this for, like, I don't know, lightsabers or laser blasts or something like this, but it works great for this. So there's like 6 billboards in each of the light rays or something, and then just set to a pretty low transparency, and they're set to add mode for their blend mode, so they get this kind of similar effect as you would use for fire or something like that. So I think that's a pretty nice effect. I of course was hoping that I could use Godot 4 and do real volumetrics, but that didn't end up happening. We can talk about that in a bit. So yeah, so that's sort of that's most of what happened in the scene. You know, it ends up looking pretty nice. You can see if you actually run the scene and run around in it, you could see it in the beginning maybe that when you walk from one side to the other, I fade in some much stronger ground fog in this area, so it gets more of a bluish tint. And I fade that out here because otherwise this part of the scene ended up looking very strange and blue, and that's just made with an area that detects whether you walk into it and out of it, and uses a tween to adjust the world environment. And like, there's nothing special about the world environment otherwise, you know. I set it up to sort of look like it was a moon, and I'm using all the normal tricks, right? Like SAO and bloom to get things to look nice, and then I'm using the ground fog. What it'll actually look like when you play the demo, when you're inside this room, it'll look like this instead. So we get a bit more of this blue fog, and you know, that was in an attempt to get more of that blue-orange contrast that I was sort of looking for. So yeah, we can sort of go on to talk about that. Like that was sort of my big thing, right? Like I went too quick again with this. I didn't sort of nail down what it was I wanted with the colors and stuff. So I started making assets without really thinking it through. So I think these walls should probably have been way more bluish, like to get that contrast I actually wanted, rather than this brown green color. The floor is a bit better. And yeah, the other sort of really big failure I feel with this thing is that this modular design doesn't really work very well, right? Because these are exactly 4 meters wide, and this is exactly 4 meters out. So you couldn't actually make like a doorway here and another room on the inside, because the walls are exactly on the edges, right? So the walls should actually have been in here, so there could have been a wall on either side if you wanted a room, and then the pillar should have been further out, then the arches should have been shaped differently. It gets quite complicated when you have to take in the wall thickness, and everything has to snap together correctly. So I sort of realized that I was doing it wrong when I did this, and decided to just make a simple shape where it's just this hallway that goes into this, and like the doors are not real doors. They don't, you know, they're just these flat models that don't. They're basically just a wall that looks like a door, right? Like you wouldn't be able to make a version of it that opens into something useful. So I'd like to try and make something similar to this, where everything actually works as a proper modular kit you can use in a cool way. You can see here I make like a fake wall out here, so I have something to block the shadows with. So the other really big thing that was such an error was this idea of like making these, like I think they look good, right? Like if we go into wireframe, we can see all these models with all these vertices, and I think you get a really cool look. You get these you get tiny shadows cast by the rocks sticking out and all this stuff. So it does look cool, but it does not perfectly tile. So that's probably a bit difficult to see. Maybe we can go into to Blender instead, and I can show it. So look here. So these just don't line up perfectly, right? And like it's really clear in Godot as well at some points. If you like, I do all kinds of stuff to hide it with how I set up the light, so it doesn't become a problem. But like it's fine for this, for example, because I made an edge here, right? So they could intersect, but these don't line up perfectly, so there's like light leak in between them. I have to make these double-sided in Godot, because otherwise, like, you can see through the back in there because these don't line up perfectly. So that's just something that I didn't think through. I didn't realize it early enough how much of an issue it would be. Maybe because the first thing I did was the pillar, where it's not an issue. But these tileable pieces, you really have to think that through, and you have to maybe manually make the low resolution mesh, which would be a lot of work, and also, like, it just took a lot of time to create some of these models, like the model that's used for the ceiling here. Like, I placed all these rocks on a high level mesh, and then I rendered it down to the low level mesh, and there ends up being like 3,000 bricks or something like that, and that just took a long time, even if I could do a lot of copy pasting. And in the end, the result wasn't even that good, because the texture resolution ends up being lower on the arch compared to the other stuff. I end up getting this ugly stretching because I did my UV unwrapping on the low res mesh before I like made it fit onto the fancy mesh. There's just a lot of problems with this, so I think the great thing to do would probably just be making a really nice tiling texture, and then maybe having like a few real bricks sticking out, and have real bricks covering some of these edges, so you get these and like have a few real bricks here on the edges, so you get a proper profile with stuff sticking out and stuff like that. So that's probably how I would do it the next time I do it. So yeah, and then let's see. And then, like, my other big takeaway again was that Godot 4 again wasn't ready. I was again hoping to do this in Godot 4. There's sort of two sides to that. Like, one part of it is that Godot 4 is still pretty unstable. The other part was that I ended up doing too much work in Godot 3.3 and getting reliant on stuff that's in Godot 3.3 and works, and that doesn't work in 4 yet, or is different in 4, so it doesn't translate. Like, I use the baked light, which looks really good, and that isn't in Godot 4 yet. They have another light baker, which I don't think is quite as good, but it didn't translate over. I couldn't move this over easily, and I had done a lot of my look already. And like, this scene definitely wouldn't have worked, I think, with the global illumination baits done SDFGI, because there would just be too much light leaking in these models. So I ended up sticking with Godot 3. So next time I do a scene like this, I'm definitely gonna do it with Godot 4. I hope that'll actually be when they have an alpha that's a little bit more stable. But then I'll start and I'll base all my decisions on what 4 can do and what works well in 4. Like, it's a real shame that we don't get stuff like the soft shadows from 4. Like, that would look great for these torches, for example. And of course, the volumetrics would be interesting. And there's just a lot of stuff that looks better and is really fun to play with in 4 that I would love to have. So yeah, that's that. Decals as well was one thing that I was completely planning to have when I started building the scene. I was thinking, like, I was gonna have blood splatters and like weird dirty stuff on the floor that would all be based on decals and just variations in the walls and stuff. And yeah, couldn't go to 4, couldn't get any decals, so that's that. So yeah. And of course, I had decided not to do add-ons, so I couldn't use one of the add-ons for decals either, so that was my own fault. Alright, so yeah, so that is basically it. But like, even with all these issues, I'm really happy with the scene. I think it looks really pretty. I think it's really cool. It makes me want to make a big dungeon crawler. So a few things here to finish up. The scene is available under Creative Commons. Like, the demo is under MIT, but all the assets is Creative Commons, and I'll link those. After I made the first scene, and I've been chatting with some other people who are into Godot, other people have been talking about trying to do some similar stuff, and one of the people is Wojtek, who's been doing these incredible nature scenes. He has a scene with a nice cabin and stuff as well. So it's great if we can have some competition and try and see how good we can make Godot look. Winston from my Discord is also talking about maybe making a scene. So I really hope to see that. I think there's a lot of really beautiful scenes coming out at the moment from Godot. So that's super cool. It'll probably be a little while before I make another one of these. I don't think I should have jumped straight into this. I want to go a bit back to making some tutorials and doing some work on maybe my add-ons and stuff like that. But another one of these will definitely come out at some point. The reason I jumped straight into another one was because it was so fun to make the first one, and it was really fun to make this one too. So I hope that people will try it out and do something fun with it, or that it'll just inspire them if nothing else. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and would like to support me in making more videos and in my open source projects like my Godot add-ons, consider supporting me on Patreon. And thanks to my patrons, Alex Litynsky, Elias Eskelinen, Joseph Katambone, Oscar Johnson, Winston, Johannes Wunsch, Space J0, Dimitri Keen, and Marcus Richter. Have a good one, everyone.